After I put up the video last night on this little AC10C1, there were a lot of commenters talking about how great these things sound and even giving the sound superlatives. And I don't know everything, so I thought, let me revisit this. Plus, I had that rattle on the low notes, so it's got a new pair of EL84s in here, and that rattle's gone. So that's nice, but given the proximity of those EL84s to the back of the speaker and all the movement of air and vibration from that speaker, you may go through several pairs of EL84s till you find some that can handle that. It's really not an optimal placement for the tubes. It's a bit odd to me since they have the chassis mounted on the entire rear panel and the speakers here. They have the tubes in the middle. They could have moved the output tubes almost anywhere on that chassis and gotten them farther from this. But I want to make sure that the amp was sounding to me yesterday as it was designed, because the cleans were good, not particularly voxy in terms of the response and depth and harmonic bloom, but a pretty clean sound, but then it just fell apart when pushed. And that's still the case. And I tried different 12AX7s. I went up and looked up the schematic last night to see what it was that I was hearing. And this amp is behaving exactly as it was designed. Now, I am not some old tubes rule dude. I'm not a Luddite. I know how circuits work. I know how all kinds of analog circuits work. If you want to talk about digital, find someone who works at AMD or Intel. But for analog, I know my stuff. So what they've done on this is they have replicated more or less the first stage of the top boost channel of a Vox AC15, AC30, using an LND 150 MOSFET. And they pretty much just plugged in more or less the same values that you would have in that channel, though they used 1.5K instead of the proper 3K cathode resistor, with the appropriate Zehners before that to keep it from clipping. Not clipping in the ways we like, but stuff that hurts the chip. And then there's an added tail, I think it was a 2.2K, the schematics in the other room, additional tail resistor added to the otherwise straight out of the AC30 playbook circuit. I will say that this ought to work just fine for a first stage, but when working around the LND 150, many times to achieve the result that you get with a particular circuit with a 12AX7, you might want to actually end up with some different values to get to the same place and same behavior. The LND 150 behaves in some ways more like a pentode than a triode, but I don't see any problem with that. I didn't have time to load up PSpice and model it and say, they did this and that's good, but if they had done this and that, it'd be even better. I'm not going to spend that time on a relatively low-end amp. After that, it goes through the standard second gain stage and cathode follower, straight from a AC30 TBX, and that's fine, and all that's correct. So I'm pretty sure that at that point, the signal sounds good and is behaving as it would in a real Vox, if you let me say that real Vox. This is not. But what it then does, and this was specifically to meet a price point, is that signal then goes through I think it's 470K and a 47K voltage divider to drop the level down tremendously. That's lowering the level down a lot. And then it goes into a set of chips which both buffer the split to the digital reverb and then mixes the digital reverb with the dry. And those chips are running at just a 5-volt supply. It's not bipolar. It's not bipolar, plus minus 30, the way it is in the AC15 and the AC60 custom series, which has a tremendous amount of headroom, no noise whatsoever. You can't hear it. It's transparent. This is a little 5-volt chip. It's pretty cheap. The whole thing was chosen to be cheap. You spend a little bit more, you get a lot more with the 15 and the 30. So I think that's where that splattiness is happening. I think that they're not padding the input of that chip enough, or maybe it needed some added diodes to keep it stable. I'm not going to spend the time to fix this. This amp is not worth my R&D time. I'm just being honest. I'm pretty sure that's where the problem is. Then the output of the second chip, which has the combination of the wet reverb and the dry sound, feeds another L&D 150, which is set for just a small amount of gain. I don't think that that's the problem. It's just bringing the gain back up after it goes through the low level 5-volt chips. Pretty much the target is to bring it back up after those chips to the same signal level it was at before those chips. And I don't see any flaws in that. It may not be precise. I'm not going to do the modeling and calculations, but I think the problem is in the 5-volt chip attenuation and the behavior and sound of those chips. After that, it goes to a very standard AC15 output section as far as the phase inverter goes. And as far as the hiss that's present, that's because this amp does not have a cut circuit at all. And, you know, I would highly suggest putting a 4.7 nanofarad cap in series with maybe a, let's say, 56K resistor across the output grids right before the grid stoppers. And that would take away the hiss and make the amp overall sound a little bit warmer. But it doesn't, without doing old radical re-engineering, I can't make that hard attack go away. That hard attack is those 5-volt chips, I'm pretty damn sure. And it gets worse if you push it beyond that. And this little Celestion VTX10, whatever they call it, makes the problem worse because it's a particularly bad sounding speaker. And the frequencies it does reproduce really well are the frequencies that sound the worst coming out of the circuit. So, you know, sound is subjective. And so when I say this amp doesn't sound very good, it doesn't feel very good, it doesn't do the thing, someone else out there likes it. Some people out there really love it. And, you know, that's fine. Some people actually like and buy and consume bubblegum ice cream. These people are aliens and not to be trusted. I would say that if you're interested in the opinion of someone who has spent 30 years restoring vintage Voxes and turning modern production Voxes into their best selves, as in making them sound like the JMI era Voxes, to me and my ears, and knowing what Voxes can sound like, this is not that. This is not the thing that you would want. Could I make it the thing that you'd want? Yeah, I could bypass the reverb stuff entirely, take the reverb out, and have a much better implementation of this, and you'd have something which would behave better and add a little, probably, if you don't need the reverb, that reverb pot position could become a cut switch or a cut knob. You know, it could be made better, but don't throw all that money at this thing. Just get an AC15 custom. Or, you know, the AC15 custom classics are going for very little these days. They're infinitely better amps than this. Probably at the same price point. They don't weigh much. The only downside to the AC15 Custom Classic, they have three. You need to add better screen grid resistors. That can be done in series with the existing one. I believe it's R23 is a 220K, that fake cut circuit. Replace that with a 47K through a 68K to get a much nicer sound out of the entire amp. And it's a plate-driven tone stack, which can be a little bit hard sounding. Put a 470 picofarad or 500 picofarad across the 100K plate resistor driving that tone stack, and it'll feel quite a bit more like the cathode follower tone stacks. Not perfect, but for the cost of a 75-cent capacitor, it's a big improvement. Sorry guys, this is just not the thing.